Okay. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I can see myself. Hello, everybody. Hope you had a good winter break, and welcome to ECE 209. This course actually recently got a permanent course number. It's going to be ECE 202C. Yeah. So it's no longer just another special topic. It's now like a proper course. I'm not sure what's going to be shown in your transcript. It might be still 209 AS, but it doesn't matter. In both cases, that counts as a regular course. If you're a grad student, so of course, this is regular course that you can take. You can take many 209 AS courses. As long as they're different courses, so that's no problem. If you're an undergrad, that also counts as your grad courses anyway. But just FYI, that this is going to be a regular class. So the goal of today is just a brief introduction about the course, the motivation behind it. Most of the class will be just the logistics and expectations. And then there will be opportunity for you to ask questions. And then hopefully if you have time and energy, we might actually talk a little bit about basics of security as well. Okay. Before getting into the kind of the details of how the grading works and all, let's talk a little bit about cybersecurity, because for some of you might be the first course that you ever taken in cybersecurity space. For some of you might be interested in cybersecurity in general. So cybersecurity is something that is growing on demand and importance by day. The main reason for it is real attacks that are unfortunately happening in many real scenarios. I'm showing you a couple of screenshots. So this is actually a real ransomware attack that happened to hospitals in Georgia when I went to school. And basically what happens is that one day the operator comes back, probably after a long break like today, and they open the computer and they see something like this that basically says that everything on your computer has been encrypted, and in order to recover it, you have to send some ransom, some money to that particular receiver. Usually, thankfully, these days for the attackers, everything can be done with Bitcoin, so it no longer needs to be money buried somewhere. You can actually send Bitcoins. So unfortunately, this is very, very lucrative business for attackers. You just run some codes called ransomware that's one way or another penetrate the system, encrypt everything, all the data in your hard drive. And in order to decrypt it again, you have to send money to them and they will send you the key, basically. That's all it does. And in fact, this was actually a successful ransomware attack. The Atlanta hospital had to pay about $10 million to the hackers, and they got some of their data back. Some of it wasn't. Globally, ransomware attacks has been about $92 billion business. And in this course, we're going to learn how to write a ransomware and how to get rich. But no, kidding, joking aside, we're going to learn about these kind of vulnerabilities and how we should fix them. Of course, we are not encouraging you to do anything offensive, but just keep that in mind that this is a real threat. So that's kind of like the cybersecurity part. This course also has a second part, and that is the IoT, Internet of Things part. The reason that Internet of Things is getting more and more interesting and why we are focusing of this aspects of cybersecurity is because IoTs are growing on numbers as well. So this is also multi-billion-dollar business, billions of devices. And unfortunately, the kind of the trend that we are facing is that everything is getting more smart and more IoT enabled, right? What used to be purely analog or even non-digital system, such as your home, now almost everything in your home is some form of a smart enabled device, right? Like even my home is like the lock is a smart lock. I have like a ring. I have a bunch of cameras in my home. Some of my appliances are Wi-Fi connected and all that. And of course, this brings lots of interesting and exciting capabilities, right? So I can, for example, check how my cats are doing when I'm away. I can open the door when the cat sitter comes and all those things, which I needed, and that's why I installed those things. But on the other hand, it means that my home is also not connected to the internet, so I basically open the door to any sort of attacks that could happen because someone can hack into to my smart home system and basically unlock the door, get inside. They can collect information from the cameras, et cetera, right? So unfortunately, there's this double-edged sword kind of situation that we are facing. And then we are unfortunately going head on into the world that is everything is digital, right? So our autonomous systems soon become like everything becomes driverless. So, all the streets now become wireless connected with lots of sensors. Everything will be picked up. All your conversation on the streets will be collected and recorded by Waymo and Uber and all those things. So the notion of privacy and the notion of having some form of non-digital world is soon to be gone, is already gone or soon to be gone, right? So it's important to understand that. Of course, there are lots of, as I said, exciting opportunities here, but when it comes to the cybersecurity, we have to be aware of these. So hopefully, as you will see in this class, there's always this kind of nuclear option, if you will, for lack of better words, where you can just ignore using any of these, right? So you can not have a smartphone, not have any sort of smart devices in your lives, then you're probably going to be safe. And that might be a smart option in some scenarios. But in reality, all of us, one way or another, are going to use these devices. So we need to figure out a way to balance between using them and securing them. Another option for kind of like when these two things comes together, and this is actually I try to use whenever I teach this class, I try to use the recent attack. And surprisingly, I never come short of finding a new attack. So this is a very recent attack that probably how many of you have heard about this pager one? Okay, so some of you. So what happened was, so of course there is this so-called war between Palestinian and Israelis, and there's this well-known group called Hezbollah, which is kind of on the Palestinian side. They use these pagers that I'm showing you here in this picture for communicating. And what happened was that one day, about 3,000 of them simultaneously, they all kind of like exploded at the same time. And it killed around 40 of these guys, and about 3,000 of them got seriously injured. Some lose fingers and eyes and all those things. I mean, politics aside, this is an interesting attack in terms of supply chain. The way it works is actually quite interesting. I was looking at it, and so the way it works is, so the Israelis, the Mossad, the intelligence group in Israel, what they did is that they created a shell company, legitimate-looking Taiwanese company, that they sell this innocent-looking pagers. Inside the pagers, though, there was this battery cells. So they open up the battery cells. Inside the battery cells, they put this plastic-based explosions. There's this material called PETN, some form of a nitride, which I'm not very familiar with. But this basically is just a plastic-based explosions. When the temperature goes up, this one explodes. The explosion is not like a big bomb, but it's big enough that can kill the person that is very close to it. So they kind of like hide this detonation material and this explosive here. So this gray part is actually another, again, plastic-based detonation, which somehow gets activated. Once this gets activated, this explodes. And they put this in some form of a case, and then they package this as a regular pager device. And they sold this as a regular company. And these Hezbollah guys, no idea where they're buying that actually from their uh, from their direct foes. They bought it from this so-called like a normal looking company. And for the longest time, they actually had this control over it. And then one day they decided that this needs to be exploded. Funny thing is, so this one was supposed to, so this is the actual size of the battery. This battery should supposed to have around 8 milliwatts of energy. In reality, because of all these other junks that is happening in the battery, it was only working for like 2.2 millihour. So it's kind of 1/4 of the actual size of the battery. Funny thing was, Hezbollah guys apparently after a while figured out that this device is depleted so fast. So they started kind of questioning this quality of this device, and they wanted to throw it away. And that's why Mossad actually decided that they need to explode this because no longer they're going to use it. But if you're, the morale of the story is that if your cell phone is depleting too fast, maybe it's not, it's not the safest battery. But why do I give you this story? I give you this story because IoT devices are everywhere, and they're increasing in number and decreasing in impact, and they are also inside many critical applications, as you can see, even in military grade systems. And unfortunately, securing these devices is very, very complex, multi-layer thing. So it's not just that I write a good software and it works. You need to understand combination of a very complex relationship between software, hardware, and even supply chain and materials. So as a result, we are facing a very, very large attack surface. That the battery, for example, is something that we never thought that could be an issue. But as you can see from this real example that killed many people, it's actually and now is something that we need to worry about. Of course, at our user level, we don't need to be worried about that something might explode in our hands. But again, this is genuinely just an example of how serious these things are. And unfortunately, there is complexity at each of these layers. So there is complexity at the software layer and the hardware layer, and even at the device level. And the trend is that these things are growing. So it's not like, oh yeah, we saw this and we decide that, oh, tomorrow maybe it's a good idea not to use pagers anymore. Unfortunately, as I said, because of these all other good things that they bring, you need to kind of rely on these devices. As a result, the only option is that using them, but using them secure. Okay? And again, these real attacks, some of them are terrible in terms of consequences. But again, the reason that we are sharing this is mostly for you to understand the real impact of this in real systems. Any questions so far? Okay. Another reason that you might be interested in IoT security is for job prospects. Many of you are grad students or undergrads that soon going to be graduated. Security actually is very, very hot topic, and many industries, including the U.S. government, is really, really in need of people with cybersecurity backgrounds, especially those who can work at the intersection of hardware and software. So for those of you who are thinking about doing something and looking for a career, this is a very, very interesting area, especially given that for the longest time I was going to talk about next time, we mainly didn't think about security as the main ingredients of the designs. We usually just design for power, design for performance, design for cost. But then we realized that security now is an issue. And that's why there's growing interest in every single company that they now need to spend more on security. And unfortunately, real attacks, just fuel this. So basically, the funny thing that sometimes we joke about is in order to show that some security feature is important, you may want to first show an attack, a real attack, and then people will realize that this is a real problem. Good thing is that many industries have realized this and now they change their approach. So Now they're more cautionary than reactionary, as it was before. All right, so what we will learn in this class will be basically mainly focusing on this cutting edge topics in IoT security. We are looking mainly at this new computing paradigms where you have some device with some computational capability, some sensors and actuators, uh, and then usually communicate with some form of a backend cloud or server connected to the internet and so on. So there is a notion of connection that is also important in the system. And then we usually look into this hardware-software interface. So some of the topics that we're going to discuss will be hardware-related. Some of them will be software-related, mostly the intersection of the two. We're going to cover the basics of many of these topics. So if you don't have the prereq, don't worry about it. We're going to actually talk about a lot of them. The class format is going to be lectures by me, coupled with some paper presentations. So you're going to also have an opportunity to do a little bit of paper presentations in this class. So it's not going to be just me lecturing. It's slightly different than, let's say, a regular undergrad class that is just me lecturing. Another important thing about this class is it's less about having homeworks or exams, and it's more about you to be encouraged to do something extra and learn a little bit more. We're going to have hands-on projects, probably 5. And then there are going to be paper readings every week. And then there's going to be my lectures. I'm going to give you kind of overview of different topics in the class. So let's actually talk about logistics. Does anyone has any comments or questions so far? All right, so for those of you who don't know me, there are lots of familiar faces. There are some new faces as well. I joined UCLA in 2020. Before that, as I said, I was at Georgia and Georgia Tech. My personal research interest is in hardware-oriented security, mainly computer architecture and systems. Well, of course, my main work is on security and privacy. 2 cats that you're going to see a lot of the pictures. I already show you a one. The right one is Meadow. The left one is PJ. They are siblings. My name is Nader. Don't call me Nader. My last name is Sehatbakhsh. It's hard to pronounce, so you can actually call me just Nader, or you can call me just Sehat, the first part of my last name. The part that I don't like is calling me with my first name and professor. So don't call me Professor Nader or Dr. Nader. I don't like that. How to contact me? As you've noticed, we are using CampusWire in this class. How many of you haven't used CampusWire before? Haven't. Not. Okay. A few of them. So CampusWire is similar in some sense to Canvas. I already posted the link on the website on BruinLearn. Please go there and enroll. That's where we're gonna post an announcement and everything about this class. We're not gonna use Canvas, so you don't see any activity in Canvas because you need to go to CampusWire. If you have anything that you want to talk about this class, the best way to contact me is direct message me on CampusWire, because that's where I'm going to see everything about this class. If there is like a serious matter, longer thing, or unrelated to this class, you can email me as well. This is my email address. My office is in this building. It's in 6th floor, 6731G. My office hours is after the class on Wednesday from 6 to 7. If that time doesn't work, after the class on Monday is usually also a good option. If that doesn't work, usually before the class was also a good option. So like from 3 to 4. If neither of these options work, you can always message me and we can find the time to chat. Okay? Before moving forward, let's actually hear a little bit about you. How was your break? Anyone did anything interesting that you want to share with the class? Mine wasn't good at all. I got very sick at the kind of middle of the break before Christmas, and I was just in bed for 10 days. So it wasn't fun at all. But how about yours? Anyone travel to somewhere interesting? How many of you did skiing? Okay, a few. Where did you go?
Lake Tahoe.
Lake Tahoe.
Yeah.
I saw pictures of like there's like heavy snow and Did you got stuck in the road or?
No, luckily, so we flew into Reno.
Okay.
Right, so we got like the rental car from there, so we luckily missed the snow. It snowed on Saturday.
Okay.
And so like we boarded that in Sunday and then it stopped. It wasn't there on Sunday, so we were able to.
Oh, nice. Okay. Okay. So you got this snow without the shenanigans. Nice. Anyone else wants to share? Yeah.
I went to Mammoth.
To Mammoth. Okay. Was it busy?
It was pretty busy. They got a bunch of snow around Christmas, but I went closer to New Year's, so
Okay.
I didn't really get a catch of fresh snow.
Cool. Anyone travel overseas? Where did you go? UK. Which part? Okay. Was it cold?
Well, it's not cold after me. Last, but yeah.
Okay. Was it your first time there? Did you like it?
Yeah, I went there with my friends, so it's super fun.
Okay. Nice. So like surrounding like Cambridge or Oxford?
Oxford.
Oxford. Okay. Nice. Anyone else? Travel? Yeah. Where did you go?
To Vegas.
Oh, you went to Vegas. I was in Vegas too, actually. That's where I got sick. When did you go? Oh yeah, the Rising Stars. Okay. How was it?
It was pretty fun.
Okay.
Unfortunately, most of our group was underage, so
Yeah.
there was a lot of stuff we had to go to.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
They said you're not legally allowed to go to karaoke after 10 p.m. They have to kick you out.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Interesting, but we still had a lot of fun. I ate the best burger I've ever had.
Yeah. Where?
Gordon Ramsay's burger. place.
Okay. That's the tourist trap. Is it the one in Hollywood, Planet Hollywood, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I gotta say, it was pretty worth it for a tourist trip. It was
Yeah,
actually
okay.
really good.
Okay. Glad that you like it. Anyone else? Anything interesting on this side of class? What did you do?
I didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, okay. That's a best
Because,
thing to do.
This is my first time in LA, so.
Oh, first time in LA. Okay.
yeah,
So you just travel
I
like
was just going.
did you go into any touristy place?
No.
No? Okay. Or
I
no?
went ice skating for the first time.
Ice skating. Oh, I want to actually try it.
This is really fun. Yeah.
Okay. Where did you go?
It was like my family friend's place in Folsom.
Okay.
But like they had a really nice rink, but like it's like learning how to walk again, basically.
Did you fall down many times or
Only twice actually. So,
twice? Oh, okay.
yeah.
So have you been skating before?
This was my first time.
Really? No, like a regular skating.
Oh no, I know how to know.
Oh, okay. So that's impressive. Cool. Okay. So glad all of you enjoyed your break. I'm happy to start the new quarter. All right, so let's talk about the course elements. So we're gonna have lectures, obviously, then we will have paper presentations. This year we are trying something new called paper critics. So I'm gonna talk about that. Class participation, exams, computer assignments, and final project. As I said, the goal of this class is I'm gonna give you some lectures about different topics. I'm gonna mainly stay at the high level, so it's more of a breadth kind of lecture. But the goal of the lectures are giving you a sufficient background so that you can understand the topic and you can go a little bit deeper yourself. We're gonna cover a few different topics, so like 8, 9 different topics. It might be hard for you to go deep in all of them, but hopefully at least a few of them will be very interesting to you and you go a little bit deeper on that. There will be parts, so that like part of this course, in order for you to actually take away something useful from this course, is you have to spend some time and digging yourself, okay? So this is a grad class, so expectation is that you can also spend a little bit of time and understanding things by yourself. One thing that you will notice is that there will be topics that you may not have sufficient background in. Don't get scared and don't be worried. We're gonna actually give you a little bit of background, but some of it, as I said, initially might be hard for you to understand, but hopefully you spend a little bit more time and understand them. Okay. And the other topics, the other components of the course, including the paper readings, presentations, projects, computer assignments, and all, they are there to complement the lecture. So the lecture is gonna kind of scratch the surface. In order to go down, you're going to spend a little bit of time reading papers. For example, if there's an interesting topic, you probably want to read not just the papers that I gave you, maybe a few more papers if you're interested. And again, as I said, the more you spend time, you're going to get more out of this class. All the information about the class is on our class website. you just go here on our labs website, go to courses, W25, index, that's where you're gonna see everything about this course. If you go to the teaching webpage of our labs, you're gonna see the previous version of this course as well. This is the 5th time, I think, that I'm teaching this course, so there are plenty of materials there. Previous years, there are slightly different topics, so not all the topics that you're talking about this year might be same as previous years. So if you see a little bit of different topics that you haven't seen here, it's because we change, add, and remove. So we try to kind of like keep the topics fresh, but there is a very good amount of overlap between them. You can actually watch all the lectures of last year tonight, binge watching them, and you're good to go, right? You don't need to no longer come to the class. We will use CampusWire, as I said, for all the announcement and questions. How many of you have enrolled in the CampusWire? I see like 20 people. Yes, please enroll as soon as possible. Does any of you don't know how to enroll in CampusWire? Okay. We won't use Canvas after today. You have a question?
Oh, no.
Okay. We're also gonna use Gradescopes for the exam and the computer assignments. You should be already auto-enrolled on Gradescope. Those of you who kind of like add later, I'm gonna resync the roster later this week. You're gonna be added again. If by end of next week you're still not added to Gradescope, let me know and I can add you directly. Lectures would be in person, hopefully, if the war doesn't end. Lectures will be recorded and posted online on YouTube. That means that many of you, unfortunately, you won't be coming to the class anymore after today. But that's fine. We will try to upload everything within 24 hours. There is sometimes I forget to press record or forget to use my microphone. Rarely happen, knock on the wood, but sometimes it happens. In those cases, I usually re-record it and post it. Or sometimes if there's like a big overlap, I might post previous year's lectures. But most of the times everything works well, so you're not going to lose anything. So attendance is encouraged, but of course not mandatory. I'm not going to keep track of who's coming and who's not coming. Questions during the class is also highly encouraged. So please try to make it interactive. I noticed that most of my grad classes is significantly less interactive than my undergrad classes, which is not great. So you need to raise the bar. Also follow guidelines. Getting sick is not great. Recently faced it. Yeah. Syllabus is posted online already. I might change it, as I said, because I usually decide what to do and what not to include as we move forward, but kind of a rough topics is already there. Paper readings. We're gonna have multiple paper posted online. In the past, prior to ChatGPT era, I asked the students to also write a review. Now it's basically meaningless because you can just give the PDF to ChatGPT and write the review for you. And I'm not going to spend time to see whether it's been generated by ChatGPT or not. As a result, there is no paper review for you. You can read it. You can write a review for it for yourself. You can even ask ChatGPT to give you a review and quickly read it, whichever you prefer. As I said, this is the course. This is the part that you decide how much time you want to spend on it. But each of these papers also going to be presented in the class by your classmates. So my suggestion to you is read them before the presentation so that you can follow along during the presentation, but you can also read them after. And again, these are mainly just pointers to a particular topic. If you're interested in that topic, a good thing to do is reading future papers after that paper or previous paper prior to that paper. We typically pick influential papers from top tier conferences. As you're gonna learn in this class, there are 4 top conferences in security. There's NDSS, there's CCS, there's Usenix Security, and there's Security and Privacy, which usually in the past called Oakland. Now it's in San Francisco, and people just now call it S&P. So these are the top tier 4 conferences in security that varies a range of like all the things related to security from all the way down from hardware all the way up to usable security and human interaction and all that is published in security conferences. Of course, all the other conferences that are not security related these days also publish security conferences. So for example, the computer architecture community also publish security conferences or HCI and so on and so forth. But most of the papers we're going to review is going to be from those top conferences. Okay. I'm going to share the link of the papers on the website sometime either today or tomorrow, by the end of this week, basically. Okay. Very important things about papers. For those of you who haven't read much papers in your life, I highly recommend you to read this paper first. This is the paper about how to read a paper. And you need to figure this out yourself of how to read this paper. But once you read that paper, you're going to read other papers. But that's very interesting, kind of like giving you a high level, because many of these papers that you're going to write, they have a lot of details and you need to know a lot of things to fully understand the paper. You shouldn't try to do that. You shouldn't try to understand everything about every paper that you read. What you should try to do is kind of getting the gist and high level idea and gradually try to kind of break things down as you get more interested. Okay. So do not try to understand everything or the first paper you read and you get overwhelmed with all the topics and all the little details that you don't follow, because it's normal. Even I sometimes read papers these days that I may not follow all the details of. Okay. All right. So once you read the papers, then there's paper presentation. There's going to be a schedule. There's going to be a Google form that I'm going to post very soon this week. You have to go there and pick the papers that you like to present. Since we have around 70 people in the class, we're going to have group presentations because we don't have time for individual presentations. The group's going to be probably between 2 to 4. Unfortunately, what I've seen is that since kind of the number of people are dropping and taking the class very, very fluid in the first 2 weeks, we need to kind of like be also very fluid. That's why we kind of go with 4, and then you might end up with 2 because the other 2 might drop the class. My suggestion to you is that if you're just shopping this course and planning not to take it, don't submit the form for presentation, because you're going to put your name there and I'm going to assign you to some groups and you're going to drop the class and those guys are going to need to kind of eat the cost, right? So don't do that. Drop the class as soon as possible if you don't want to take this class. If you want to keep it, then keep it. And of course, I understand that some of you might change your mind as we move forward. But if you know for sure that you're going to drop this class, drop it as soon as possible. You're welcome to continue coming to the class. This is a class open to public. And then, as I said, all the videos are available online. You can take them and watch them whenever you want. Teammates, you can start talking to other people to find a teammate. If you don't have a teammate, don't worry about it as well. You're going to fill the form. I'm going to assign a teammate to you based on your interests. Presentations will be around 10 minutes for the whole group. So every person is going to probably present about 2-3 minutes. The goal of presentation is go a little bit deeper into the topic of the paper, and it's also kind of a tutorial. So you kind of try to explain the topics of the paper to the fellow students. So others are going to learn from your presentation. Your presentation is not just for me to see how well you present, but it's also part of the lecture. Okay. As a result, it's important that you do a good job because it's kind of like a crowdsourcing situation. If you do a good job in your presentation, those who listen to your presentation also learn better, right? So do it as you wish you would, like, your teachers would do it, right? So if you are complaining about the quality of lectures, now it's your time to show your quality, right? So do a good job in presentations so that we also as professors learn how to do a good job in my presentations, all right? You will be judged based on your presentation skills and mostly the content. So you have to follow specific content. But it's also a good way for you to present in front of a crowd and get some feedback from them. And as I said, please use good visuals, good quality, practice. Don't come here and read it from your phone or from screen or from papers. Don't speak mechanically. Don't like kind of like look into like frozen, and try to be interactive. As I said, all of you have taken lots of courses. You know what is a good lecture and what is not a good lecture. You'll probably have good professors who taught you good lectures. Try to imitate them and try to use them as your source. Okay. So there are 4 goals in presentations, as I said, for you specifically, to opportunity for you to read the paper more deeply. So the paper that you're assigned for presentation, I'm assuming that you spend a little bit more time. You're probably going to read a few more other papers related to that paper and so on. You're going to practice your, excuse me, practice your presentation skill and receive some feedback. Other students who didn't read the paper or who didn't fully understand the paper, we're going to understand that paper. And then, of course, there will be some opportunity for you, some of you guys, to meet and network and learn from each other. That's also useful. So keep this guideline safe. So this lectures, of course, is already posted on the website. Whenever you are presenting, make sure to go to this slide and make sure that your slides follow this. Okay, I'm going to go over them quickly, but you should go back to this. First of all, it has to be 10 minutes. More than that, you're going to lose points. Skip any sort of motivation or introduction, because motivation and introduction I already gave about IoT and importance of security. One thing that I've realized sometimes people do is coming and speaking for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, why IoT is important, why security is important. Everybody here knows that, right? So just go to the specific problems that paper tried to solve, right? So the first slide should be that problem. Skip the kind of the motivation, because most of the presentations start with motivation. You don't need that in this class, okay? Then try to spend a little bit on the background, especially the background that we didn't cover in the class. So talk about those. One thing that is very important is that make sure that you watch the lectures to that point, especially about that topic that you're going to present. Make sure that you don't repeat things that I've already said in the class. Again, there are some people come to the paper presentation, no idea about what has been discussed last week. And then they're going to start talking about exactly the same things that I described in the class. That's going to be a waste of time. So make sure that you watch the lectures, you're up to date to the course materials, and then come and present, okay? And then try to actually not only just don't repeat, but also connect. So, yeah, oh, in the class we talked about this. This is actually the next step, because the papers that I select for you is mainly kind of one next step after what I describe in the class. So you're going to actually see the fact that these are kind of like the next step in the lecture. That's how we're going to go a little bit deeper into the topic. Once you do that, then describe the solution, try to provide intuition, because as you're going to see, you're going to see a lot of papers as students in this class. You're not going to remember specifics of these papers, but you're going to remember the intuition behind some of them. And that's going to be useful for your career in future. So try to give that intuition so that people say, oh, this paper was this kind of high level idea. This was their main kind of, observation. This was their main intuition. This was their main insight. And you're going to remember that. That's how usually I remember papers as well, because you cannot remember all the details about all the papers all the time. Okay. And then don't spend too much time on the results. So don't show a big table and go over like this line and that line. Again, that's not very important for us in this class. The point of presenting paper is giving you intuition, giving you kind of the next level of what's been discussed in the lecture. And hopefully you can talk a little bit about what's your thoughts on that paper. What are the future steps if you have spent some time and see what happens after that paper? Because some of these papers have been published a few years back. There has been more work, more recent work after that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about those things as well. Okay? So hopefully that fueled a little bit of discussion and interaction in the class, either during the lecture or even on campus while once people saw the presentation, watched the lectures. Excuse me. So this is a new thing that we're going to try this year. In the past, I was basically watching the presentations in the class and I write down stuff and send it to the presenters. That was the feedback they received. This year, I want you to actually provide feedback to your fellow students. We're going to use Peerceptive. How many of you have used Peerceptive before? None of you? Okay, one maybe. So it's this website that essentially all it does is that there's a file that you can just type. It's similar to Google Doc, honestly. So what you need to do is that I'm going to assign a paper for you to give feedback. Okay. There's going to be 2 weeks of providing feedback. There is going to be the week that you're presenting the paper. You have to provide feedback for other papers, and not your paper, obviously, other papers on that same day. You have to provide feedback. And I'm going to also give you another week that you need to come here and provide feedback. So basically these 2 weeks of providing feedbacks, 2 days basically. And what you need to do is that you're going to be given a rubric. You're going to watch the presentation live, and you're going to write down some stuff, providing feedback. Try to make the feedback, of course, constructive, because that's what your fellow students and friends are going to read it. But you're going to also grade them based on the rubric. Okay. And I think that's important so that you can also understand what are the important things and what is a good presentation and what is not a good presentation, and so on and so forth. I'm going to give you a little bit more details on Perceptive. We're going to do a trial run. I haven't done it before as well, so we're going to see how it works. Don't worry too much about your grades on the presentation and all. This is kind of like a practice that we're going to do this year. Questions so far? Yes, I'm going to talk about that. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Participations, as I said, participation is optional. You can come to the class, ask questions. During the presentations, you can ask questions. That's also very helpful. You can ask questions on CampusWire. Everything on CampusWire is anonymous, so feel free to ask any questions or feel free to respond to any questions. Share your thoughts. Don't be kind of shy about sharing your thoughts in class or on CampusWire. I was reading an interesting article the other day about not coming to the class, and so there was this guy at Stanford that run this experiment that each class that you're coming, given the tuition that you're paying around $200-ish per class. Okay. And the interesting analogy is that each week that you're not coming to the class is like buying a Taylor Swift ticket and not going to the concert. Okay. So you are losing out on Taylor Swift concerts. I mean, of course, the analogy is not great, but seriously, I think coming to the class would be helpful in that sense. But of course, there are some of you who would learn more by watching lectures and sitting at home with, like, I don't know, like, not standing up, or not, like, you may want to have a more friendly environment for you to learn, and that's totally fine. But as I said, I encourage you to come to class as much as you can. There will be bonus points for participation on CampusWire. On CampusWire, there's this thing called reputation points. What I'm going to do is that the rank first in the reputation point at the end of the class going to get 4% bonus points directly to their final grade. So basically, it's just huge bumps in your grade. 2 to 5 going to get 2.5%. 6 to 10 going to get 1.5%. Okay, and this is the pure ranking. Anybody else not going to get anything, and this is just bonus. How do you get participation points in the CampusWire? By asking questions, by answering each other's question, getting likes and stuff like that. So that's it. Another thing that coming from the class gives you is good impressions. If you're looking for research positions in our lab, if you're looking for letter of recommendations and all, I'm going to give letter of recommendations to people who I know. I'm not going to give you letters if you never come to the class, even if you do well in the class. Okay? Exam. There will be one exam. Most likely would be Wednesday of week 9. The reason for it is that week 10 will be for project presentations. I'm going to talk about it. Usually we don't reschedule it at all. So if you cannot make it, let me know ASAP. We can talk about it. Most likely there's no other options. You probably don't want to take this class if you cannot make the exam. The main goal of the exam is that you watch the lectures, because often I see that people kind of like watch a little bit of lecture, but kind of don't really engage and just do the computer assignments and all. So I want you to make sure that you watch the lectures. The exam will be directly from the lectures and the paper presentations, but not from the papers. So you don't need to read the papers or memoirs, anything. The exam will be open book, open notes, so you can actually bring notes. It will be in person. No chat GPT, unfortunately, so you're not allowed to use that. No internet. Most likely this year I'm gonna do it paper-based, but let's see. Maybe I'll do on laptop. But you can bring notes if you want to. That's fine in either case. Yeah.
So could it be like notes on your iPad or computer, like Amazon?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes. You can do that. Usually in the past we have a collection of multi-choice, short answer, and some open-ended questions. That's usually the format of the exam. Questions so far? All right, so computer assignments is probably going to be 5, but let's see how we do. We might be doing 4. The first one would be on cryptography. The second one would be on side channels. The third one would be on, I think, remote attestation, then binary analysis. The last one would be on blockchains. All of them would be some coding. So usually C or Python. You're allowed to use whichever you want. Submission will be on Gradescope. They're usually simple assignments. They're not, so each one you can think about like 4 hours, I would say 4 or 5 hours on average. So they're not like a heavy project that you have to write like 3,000 lines of codes. They're individual, so they're not group-based. And mostly just for you to kind of get the gist of the concepts that talked in the class. So as I said, most of them are fairly simple in terms of coding and even the concepts. They're not like a crazy computer science. Okay. I want you also to do research a little bit. You can do it individually or in groups. It can be the same group as your paper presentations, or it could be different groups. That's on you. It should be something that can be done in 4 to 6 weeks at most. So you shouldn't go like crazy big project. I want you to finalize your project and project proposals by week 4, so that you have kind of 5 to 6 weeks to actually do the project. And then last week of class, we're going to reserve it for final project presentation. So we can actually learn from each other's presentations. There will be also a very short, like a 4-page report about your projects also, which is due on week 10. Okay. What are the ideas that you should go for? Topics of the lectures, mainly the papers. This is the best place for you to start. My suggestion is to start with the general topic, that this is what I kind of interested in. Try to read the papers a little bit. Excuse me. And get a little bit of idea of what's going on. Of course, it takes time. That's why I'm saying that until week 4, you have time to figure out. And another thing that you can do is that check recent conferences. Go to the program page. Look at the papers and see which one is interesting to you, and read that paper and see what you can do there. What's the scope? I think the easiest thing that you can do is that take an existing paper and try to implement it open source, like make an open source implementation of it. Of course, if it doesn't exist, if it does exist, then that doesn't count. And try to propose some minor improvement. Again, this is 4 to 6 weeks, so you're not going to do something crazy novel. If you can, that's great. But if you don't, again, this is more for you to kind of learn a little bit how to do research. I'm lenient on kind of the scope and the grading of the projects. Another thing that you can do is implementing a new attack. That's always something that you can try. You can also take a known attack and try to find a defense for it. That's also something that you can do. There's also this thing called systemization of knowledge, SOK, which is very common in security conferences. Essentially, what it does is that you pick a topic and try to look into like a few different papers and projects about that and try to systemize them. So for example, like you can extract some common knowledge about them or try to categorize them. Something like survey papers, but not exactly survey, it's a little bit more. There are actually lots of these SOKs. If you just search SOK security, you will see a tons of this. You can read them and get some idea about them. The grading for this would be based on effort. If you do something and it doesn't work, so if the outcome of your project is that absolutely not working, that's fine as long as you have tried. So if you show me that I tried this and this and this, but it didn't work, you're gonna get the full grade. I'm not here expecting you to fix a big problem. If you can, then that's great. Sometimes this project leads to actual publication. For those of you who are motivated to have a paper publication or do something significant, that's a good option for you. There's also an embedded CTF competition going on right now. UCLA has a team. So many of the guys are here of that team. Instead of doing the project, you can also be part of the eCTF team, and that counts as your project. But you have to be all the way until the end. If you drop, then that doesn't count as your project. Okay. If you want to know more about eCTF, who should they contact? Is that you, Kai? Or you?
Talk to anyone from IEEE or ACM Cyber and they tell you how to.
Or post on CampusWire and we give you more information. Okay. All right, so grading final projects 20%, paper presentation 20%, paper presentation further breakdown into 10% content and 5% delivery of your presentation. Since you also have to provide feedback to others, that counts as 5%. We're not going to look into your feedback of like what you've written. You just have to submit it in time and you get 5% for that. Okay. Computer assignments 25%, exam 35%. There will be bonus as well. Top 5% of the class will get an A plus. 92 to 100 gets an A. 88 to 93 gets an A minus. Everybody else gets a B. Unless you're below 60, you're gonna get an F. Most people in this class get an A or A minus. It's not that hard to get an A. Yeah.
Where's the B plus?
What's that?
Where's the B plus?
There is no B plus.
Oh, okay.
I don't like B plus. It's A or B. That's it.
A minus.
Well, because people like to get an A. That's why. But I personally don't like A minus, A plus, and so on. Okay. Questions? Yeah.
Exam in coding or algorithms?
Exam in coding. Also in exam, like questions about coding. Most likely not. It's mostly will be, as I said, like either true or false questions or short answer questions or some more of a qualitative questions. I'm gonna post samples of previous years, so you're gonna see.
How many paper presentations? I mean,
Each group should present only one paper, but you have to submit critics for all the papers within that day. So usually 3. So excluding you, so like 2 or 3, and then there will be another. So critics will be like 4 or 5, and then 1 paper presentation by you. And no paper review. Excuse me, still recovering. No paper reviews. Any other questions? Yep.
Can we choose when we do the paper presentation and when we review it, or like is it just random?
So you're gonna choose. So the question is, can you choose when to present? You're gonna choose which papers you want to present. So you have there is a form that you have to select up to 5 papers that you like to present. And I'm gonna post which day those presentations will be. So you can choose that. As for paper critiques, no. Paper critiques, one of them will be the same day. The other one will be some other day. If you absolutely cannot make it the other week, you can watch it and present, like, submit your critics, but I want you to be present. So you have to let me know if you can make it, and we can make some exception in some cases. But presentations, you have to be here. Please don't present it over Zoom. That's very boring. Any other questions? Okay, let's have a quick break. We come back in 5 minutes and continue.
Well.
Okay, so other few quick notes. There is no particular reference book for this class, given that we are kind of talking about many other things. So reading materials is mainly the papers. Okay. Hi, Jackie. There is no discussion session in this class as well. So no discussion. There might be a TA, may not be. We don't know yet. Since everything is going to be recorded, your voice might be on the videos. If you have a problem with that, let me know, because I'm going to post this online on YouTube. So if you have any problem with your voice or potentially your face, unlikely, but might be shared publicly online, let me know. Otherwise, I'm assuming that you're fine with that. For projects, we're gonna check similarity of the codes, and hopefully we're not gonna see that much similarity. If we do, we're gonna ask you why. And of course, it's gonna lead into academic honesty cases. If you see large similarities, you're not allowed to share codes with your friends, but of course you're allowed to discuss, but you're not allowed to share codes, and try to be creative if you're sharing. We don't have masters or online this year. This usually course is also offered online. This year we don't have it, so nothing else to share there. PTEs and waitlist. If you are on waitlist, most likely you will get in to the class. So getting into the waitlist is almost guaranteed. Those of you who are not on the waitlist, most likely there will be spots open, as you've seen some folks already left. Might be because of the class, or might be other commitments. But usually, I mean, typically undergrad classes are over enrolled because people are not sure which class they want to take. So they shop around. That's why usually, like if you see like 60 people enrolled, not all of them keep the class. So it's a little bit different than undergrad classes. So there's going to be more spots open, what I'm trying to say. Wait until next week, but in unlikely situation, if the class stays full, I'm gonna issue a few PTs, maybe 10 or something. We're not gonna go crazy, but I don't think there will be that many requests anyway. And usually this class is a way to do it is that you add additional computer assignments and there will be lots of drops. So we need to, I'm gonna do that. But no, just joking. This is a fairly chill class. I want you to learn. I want you to spend time and understanding these things. You can spend as little as possible in this classes or as many hours as possible. It's really depending on level of interest that you have. I'm not gonna force you to do things. There are things that I'm gonna force you to do, including computer assignments and presentations and all, but most of it is, as I said, it's just your interest in the topic. All right, let's talk about a little bit of fundamentals as well, enough with logistics. The first question is, what is security? And why should we care? Anyone wants to chime in? What is security? When I say security, I mainly talk about cybersecurity, of course, but you can also expand this to general security, like physical security as well. So what is security? Yeah.
To feel safe and protected.
To feel safe and protected, okay. Can you make it more specific about cybersecurity? Like
Yeah, so I mean, like making sure you're like. on
your files are happy
Yeah, right,
and
safe.
they're not. Okay, yeah.
Private things stay private.
Private things stay private, okay.
Maybe like protecting data.
Protecting data, okay.
Like access control.
Access control, okay. You want to say something there?
I guess I would say like it's kind of like safeguarding something.
Safeguarding something, okay. Yeah, these are all good points. Anyone else wants to say? Yeah. Preventing attacks, okay. It's good. Yep. Patching vulnerabilities, okay. It's also good. Yeah, these are all right directions. Generally, if I want to make a very generic statement about security, security is achieving some properties in the presence of an adversary, okay? That property could be, for example, keeping your file safe, could be access control, could be privacy, could be many different things. But generally, if I can achieve a specific property that I can define very clearly, and then I can achieve that in the presence of an adversary, that's the main thing, then I say that this system is secure on that property. A fairly simple example is only Nina can read a file, and Nina is a user. And the main thing here is that only Nina can read that file, which means that other people's cannot. So we need a mechanism to authenticate who is Nina. That's the one thing that we need to do. And the second thing is that we need a mechanism to block everyone who's not Nina. And also we need a mechanism for whoever who is indeed Nina to actually access that file. So we need a mechanism for actually, so it's not all about blocking things, it's also about providing services. And the important thing about security, as you will learn, is that security goes hand in hand with other important metrics in the system. So as I said, you can just go and block everything and you're going to have a perfectly secure system. But you also need to provide other things such as access and performance and power and all those things. So what are the main goals of security? The main goals of security is what we call CIA, interestingly. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are the three main things that you want to achieve. In some systems, you want to achieve all of them. In some systems, you want to achieve some of it. Confidentiality means that those things, those piece of data that needs to be confidential stays confidential, which means that only authorized users has allowed to see the content of particular piece of information. Integrity means that what you're supposed to receive or send or access should be the same thing that the original source of that property designed it to be. So if you receive a message, typically integrity is commonly used with message. When we say message integrity, we are talking about the fact that what the receiver receives is the exact same thing that the sender sends, okay? Integrity is different than confidentiality. In integrity, you want the message to be seen. You just want to make sure that this is indeed the same message that I sent, okay? You can have both confidentiality and integrity together. So for example, you want to encrypt your message such that only the receiver who has the key can decrypt it and see it. But you also want to make sure that integrity of this message is safe. Make sure, because keep in mind that confidentiality alone will not going to fix the integrity issues. For example, the attacker can substitute one message with another message. You might decrypt it and see that this is a legitimate message, but this is not the same message that the sender wants to send. So we need both of these, and we're going to talk about both. And the last thing is availability, and this one is actually quite important these days. Many of the attacks does not try to understand what's happening inside or try to change anything. It just tries to make the device unavailable. Many of the attacks are like that. So the ransomware attack that I showed you, targeting the availability of your system, it doesn't target the confidential, it doesn't try to read whatever you have in your hard drive, doesn't care, or it might. It doesn't try to change anything. It just makes your hard drive unavailable. And since you really need that hard drive, you have to pay them ransom such that you get it back, okay? There are tons of these examples. Usually it goes under the category of what we call denial of service or DOS attacks. These DOS attacks, oh, this one doesn't work. These DOS attacks are trying to basically just enable the service. For those of you who are familiar, are you guys familiar with this? Attacks happens in Las Vegas actually a few months, a year ago, that all of their ATM machines and all the casinos machines and the hotels and everything was stopped working. So there was this very sophisticated and interesting attack that what they did was, this was called social engineering. Let me quickly explain the attack and then I'm going to talk about availability. So the way it works is that Social engineering is like this, that this is actually one way of getting, so for example, let's say you want to get a password, or you don't want to get the password, you just want to get this two-factor authentication. So you want someone, so you have the passwords of my email, but since I have two-factor authentication, just typing in the password doesn't work. You need also me to push the button, okay? So how would you do that? You call me and say that I'm the chair of the department, and for some reason I need to access your email or whatever. Please just allow me to enter the system. Of course, I may not do it, but this hotel's what they did, they said that I'm the manager, I'm the head of the IT security or whatever. We need to get into the system. Can you kind of approve the request? And they did, actually. So this is a multi-billion-dollar company, MGM, that they allow the attackers to call them to log into their system. Once they logged in, then they basically inside the system, they can do whatever they want to do with the system. So they change all the password, they remove all the accesses. So everything, including like the key card of the hotel was not working because they changed everything. And they request a lot of money for the system to come back. So this is an examples of where the availability of the system is in danger. And actually, unfortunately, many of these systems, that's all the attacker care about, because they don't care about the data. They just want the system to not work. Similar things for like these autonomous cars. There are attacks that try to force the system to crash into a wall. For example, there was an attack to a BMW cars a few years ago that they forced the system, the autonomous driving system to make a wrong decision. They crash into the wall. There are various different reasons for this, of course. Okay, so these are the main three things. Remember always that we are targeting CIA. Okay, and as I said, in some systems could be one, some systems could be all of them. Beyond security, although there are other things that are directly relevant to security, but they're not directly security, things like privacy, authentication. There's also things such as reliability and fairness and explainability that you need to be worried about in some cases. They are close to security, but they're not directly security. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of these in some topics that we're going to talk about. But just keep them in mind as well. Okay. So how do we achieve security? Going back to that definition that I gave you, that we have some policies and we want to achieve that goal. So there are two things that we need to do. We need to implement some policies, and then we need to enforce those policies. Okay. Unfortunately, both the implementation and enforcement can cause issues. So for example, in the hotel example, there were policies, there were good security passwords, there were two-factor authentication, there probably were IT and so on, but the enforcement was an issue. There was a human error in that particular scenario. They called them, they thought that these are, their managers, they were scared or whatever. They just shared the password or they just allowed them to log in, okay? So there was the enforcement that was an issue. You could argue that maybe there should be a better protocol for, let's say, authenticate the voice and all. And that's probably what these companies are doing right now. But generally, the reason that many of these security breaches happens is that it's not that we didn't care about security. It's because we either didn't properly implement it because of some bugs, or we didn't properly enforce it because of, again, some other bugs. Okay? And then usually what we want to do, so enforcement and implementations are the main steps, but you also want to at least have what we call graceful failure, which means that if its system fails, at least you want to detect it early stages, right? And there should be some reactions to the attack. So many of these attacks, you cannot completely eliminate them, but there might be some ways that you see that your system is under attack and you can do something about them, okay? So there are many of these critical systems, like a nuclear power plant. There are lots of ways in this nuclear power plants that they know that their systems are under attack, so they can quickly shut things down, okay? because like, in order to get to the some points that is really dangerous, it takes some time. So you can actually, there are indicators that you can figure out and you can set up things. So we're going to talk about detection and mechanism for anomalies and all later in the class as well, but we're going to mainly talk about implementation and enforcement in the class, okay? So in order to define this policy, so security ultimately becomes a list of policies that I need to implement and I need to enforce, okay? That's really what security is. For that, usually there are some quote-unquote best practices or principles, okay? Almost any systems that we design, whether hardware or software, follow some or all of these principles, okay? These are kind of like golden rules. These are intuition mostly, okay? So we're going to talk about them for the rest of this lecture. Let's see if some of you might know these or think about this. So what are those principles? Have you thought about, do you have any suggestions? Yeah.
You need like least privilege.
Least privilege is one of the principles, right? So don't give access to someone you don't have to, right? Like to users, just give minimum access possible to every single user in your system. Give more access if you have to. And this is a very good principle. Okay, that's one. Anything else? Yep.
Least attack surface, so close all ports.
Okay, so reduce the attack surface. That's good. So as much as you can. It's kind of like going back to what I said at the beginning, which if you don't, for example, need to install a smart lock in your home, maybe you don't, right? So just use a physical key, and that reduces the attack surface. You don't need to no longer be worried about the vulnerabilities that brings because there's no such a thing exists in your home. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Zero trust.
Zero trust. Okay. Don't trust anyone. That's good. That's kind of similar to least privilege, I would say, because you kind of don't trust. You don't give anything to anyone unless you trust them. But yeah, that makes sense. Anything else? Come on, there are some basic ones that all of you know. Use your intuition in life. What do you do for your security? What do you do for your physical security? That's the same thing that you would do in your cybersecurity. Yeah.
Defense in depth.
Defense in depth, exactly. So that's one that you want to have multiple layers of defense. That one, if one fails, at least there's another that can fix it. Okay, that's good. Anyone else? Okay, so let me go through them one by one. The first one that we need to know is what we call threat model. The first thing you need to know about security is you need to know what are the attacker's capability, okay? And what is your capability as the defender or as the system, okay? This is usually what we call threat modeling, and on almost all security projects, that's the first thing you do, okay? What is it that we are trying to protect? What are the capabilities of the attacker in the system, okay? So let me give you a little bit of example. So when we're talking about attack, the first thing we need to know is what the attacker knows about our system. Is our system open source? Is it closed source? If it's closed source, excuse me, what is the likelihood that our source codes might be leaked? What happens if our source code leaks? Is the attacker an insider? Is an outsider? What sort of level of access the attacker has? For example, if you're talking about a nuclear missile, hopefully this nuclear missile has been stored in some secured place, probably guarded by soldiers and tanks and all that, right? So it's unlikely to think that like a random attacker can get very close to the nuclear plant or nuclear missile. But if you're talking about Waymo or autonomous car, the attacker can literally sit in the car, have access to some part of that system, right? If you're talking about attacking this computer in UCLA, this computer, everybody can probably access it because this door is not locked. The building is not locked and so on and so forth. But if you're talking about the servers installed in AWS, then probably not many people can access that. So what sort of access in terms of physical, how much time the attacker might have, what sort of privilege they have, what do they want to achieve, and what sort of resources do they have? Are we talking about small hacker team of undergrounds in Russia or China? Or are we talking about intelligence agency of a big country like Israel? These are two very different assumptions about the type of attacks that your system. For example, my website cannot protect itself from large scale attack, but maybe if one of you gets pissed off and try to do DDoS attacks, my website can hold it, right? So these are different things that and then on my side, I also need to know what are we trying to protect? What is the secret? What are we worried about? Is availability something that we are worried about, that we don't care? What we have in terms of protection, what can we trust, and what are the human factors? These are the main things that we need to be worried about on our side. Okay, so that's the first thing. Threat model. We need to understand the threats in our systems. Whenever you become a security researcher or security principal in any companies, that's the first thing you do. And probably people before you have done it already. But if you write a new program, if you're designing new systems, that's the first thing you do. The second thing that you need to be worried about is the overhead and trade-offs. Before solving any problem, you have to think about what is the cost of security. You cannot build a system that is secure, but 100 times slower than a regular system. Nobody's going to buy that. Nobody wants that, and it's not going to work. At the end of the day, security needs to play in a real economy, needs to compete with other competitors, and so on and so forth. So solutions has to be realistic, has to have minimal overheads, minimal trade-offs with other things, okay? Unless this is a very, very crucial system. So for example, for a military system, there are tons of things, secure things that are installed in a tank. So in a tank, they're not worried about power consumption or cost. That's why like an F-33 or 32 costs $1 billion, because there are tons of these other things that is implemented there. So it's not just a missile or just not a plane. There are many of these sophisticated radars and lasers and all that things that try to protect the systems from various attackers, okay? So you need to understand the landscape of your design. Most of you are gonna work at the consumer grade. So that means that power and area and performance, these are also very important. You cannot come up with the security solutions that are gonna basically destroy those other metrics, okay? And then, of course, your solution has to be user-friendly. Most of you probably pissed off with two-factor authentication, for example, right? So now imagine 10-factor authentication, right? Much more secure, but it's much less convenient, right? So it has to be user-friendly as well. The third thing is, as we kind of talked about the defense in depth, multi-layer defense. Usually it's a good idea not to have just one layer, because if that one layer breaks, then the system is fully compromised. You usually have multiple layers. This is typically, for example, networks has multiple layers of network, so that if someone gets into one layer, only compromise some systems and not the others. So usually we have to have this defense in depth, okay? The fourth one we already talked about, list privilege, means that we need to give minimum amount of permissions to an entity or a program to let them complete. So for example, many of your apps by default doesn't have access to a microphone or a camera. Why? Because there's no reason for an app that, let's say, I don't check your bank accounts, to have access to a microphone. If they do need to access the microphone, they will ask you, and you're the one that give them the privilege. It's a good idea to not give them privilege as much as you can, unless you really need it for some specific functionality, okay? The fifth thing is distributing trust, okay? You usually don't want to give everything to one single machine or one single person, usually the systems have different distributed trust. So for example, again, in nuclear systems, there is usually not one key, but there are multiple keys. Multiple keys have to be present so that you can then launch a missile. Otherwise, with one key, you cannot. And the idea is that, you know, if the attackers can manage to get one key, there's still two other keys that they cannot get into, and hopefully they cannot launch a missile. So usually we don't do we don't give power to just one system. Okay. 6.1 is what we call ensure complete mediation. This is actually very, very hard part in security, and that makes security very, very difficult because it's not good that you can fix the security in some cases or in some computer. What you need to do is being able to completely solve the problem, because unfortunately, if you just fix one but not the other, the attacker will use the other. So the attacker will always use your weakest link, right? So you always have to find all the possibilities and fix all of them. That's why defense is very, very hard compared to attack, because attack you need to just show one case. For defense, you need to show all the cases, which is very, very hard. This one is something that's not very intuitive to many people. You should not rely on obscurity. You should not assume that there are aspects of your system that is not known to the attacker, and that's why your system is secure. You have to assume everything about your system is known, and yet the attacker cannot attack your system. In fact, all the crypto algorithms that we use, including AES and RSA and also all those things, the code for it, the algorithm is known word by word, line by line. Everything about a crypto algorithm is known to everyone. There's nothing secret about it. The only thing that is secret about it is the secret key. There is like a piece of information that you keep secure. Excuse me. Anything else is open and everybody knows about it. So do not rely on obscurity in order to make your systems. That's very tempting, and many people want to do that, but that's a bad idea. Okay. This is usually also called Shannon or Kerckhoff principle. Two more things. One is we usually use what we call fail-safe default. For example, building locks should be always designed such that if the power goes out, they become locked. They stay locked. Okay. Why? Because if your system if your building is a security critical building, your fail-safe strategy should be secure. Okay, so it should be something. If you have an option between two things, you should always go with the secure option in the default version of your system. Okay, and one before last is using isolation. This one is I was actually expecting you guys to say. Isolation is one of the key principles of security. Try to isolate things as much as possible. Do not share things as much as you can, and that will give you security as much as possible. And last thing is simplicity. The simpler your system is, the more secure it is, because there's less chance for bugs. There are more opportunity for you to verify and check the system. So if there are two options going with like a crazy complex solution and very, very simple solution, you always go with the simplest solution possible, because then you can check and verify whether or not this is a secure system. Okay. So these are the principles. Okay. Any questions from these principles? So from these principles, we come up with policies, okay? We don't necessarily follow all these principles all the time, but these are, as I said, these are mostly intuition. So you go with these intuitions all the time when you're designing a system. You may not follow all of them all the time, but it's better to do that. So what are the challenges? The main challenge in security is not because these principles or policies are wrong. They're absolutely perfect. When it comes to implementations, you don't implement it correctly. For example, there is a password checker that you don't implement correctly, or there is this method for isolation or list privilege that you don't implement it correctly, and so on and so forth. You might ask, why do I don't implement it correctly? The reason is these are very, very complex codes, so bugs are inevitable, right? So you cannot write 1,000 lines of code without an error. And these systems becomes like this massive scale system, software or hardware, is really hard to find the source of bugs. And unfortunately, these bugs are kind of layered bugs that is not easy to find. The second problem is what we call zero-day vulnerabilities or unknowns vulnerabilities. There are some vulnerabilities that when we were designing a system, we had no idea about. We're going to talk about some of these very interesting ones later on in this course, but there are actually things that we never thought about when we were designing a system. Part of it was because we didn't really spend enough time, we didn't spend enough energy and money when we were designing it. Part of it is just the nature of the problem was so complex. The other challenge is that usually there are solutions for some of these problems, but we don't want to implement them because of the overheads. So it's not like, oh, we cannot like fix this issue. We can, but it will cost a lot and we don't want to do it. So for example, many of the hardware vulnerabilities can be fixed by running a very simple processor, very slow processor. But that means that you cannot do many functionalities that you have these days. And then generally kind of going back to the unknowns, one of the big challenges is the large attack surface, right? There are many things to consider, right? Like the Hezbollah guys, when they bought this pagers, probably they never thought that the battery can be some plastic explosive in it that can explode. But now they know, right? So now they can fix it. And then sometimes it's actually the policy. Sometimes the policies might not be adequate. Sometimes you might not do a great job in defining those policies as well. Okay. Last thing I want to say is that security is a very cross stack, and that's why in this class we also kind of move along from hardware to software and back to hardware. And it's as a result of this cross stack, it's kind of everybody's problems and nobody's problems. So you talk to the software developer and they say that the hardware is the source of the problem. You talk to the hardware designer and they say that software is the source of the problem. And unfortunately, understanding security becomes this hard problem because now you need to know everything. And as a student, security is one of those courses that you probably need to know a little bit about hardware and software, then you can understand security a little bit better. But as I said in this class, we're going to give you a little bit of background in all of that. So the things that are waiting for us, so we talked about principles and policies and theories a little bit. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about cryptography, which may not be the favorite topics of some of you, but it's useful. Then we're going to talk a little bit about hardwares and primitives. We're going to talk about other things such as software and applications. That's pretty much it for today. Just this key message at the end of the lecture that unfortunately computers are controlling many critical tasks. So it's our job to kind of understand this and make sure that they're secured. These are also a list of courses that are relevant to this course. You can search and kind of read them in your free time as well. Some of them lectures are available online as well. Okay, so I see you guys on Wednesday.